Hey, welcome back to Pro Sex Studios. I'm Brian Downs, and today we're going to be talking about the great romance of our generation, Titanic. 1997, directed by James Cameron. What are the attitudes about sexuality presented by this film? Well, let me run straight to the summary. They're very negative. Basic read. Negative meme number one, the wanting disaster. Rose meets Jack, and they feel a wild, passionate attraction for one another. They fall in love immediately. They're a couple of young, good-looking lovers. And then terror and death and devastation. The ship hits the iceberg. Lots and lots of people die. The movie shows us that in long detail. And one of those people is Jack. So wanting sex, having sex, talking about sex leads to catastrophe. Obviously, well, wait a minute. Let's take a deeper dive. The complicated read of this movie is my sub-theme, bad behavior by female characters. Rose is terrible. Rose is an awful human being. I can't be the first person to have ever noticed this. I know, it can't be original. But in watching this film to do this video, I mentioned this to two women I know who I was watching a different movie with. And both women old enough to have seen Titanic in theaters. Their heads turned toward me. Two civilized people. Their heads turned toward me like, you shut your dirty mouth if you want to get out of here alive. And then they started raising their voices to explain why I was wrong and revealing detailed knowledge of the film, which came out 23 years ago, but they remember it shot for shot. Apparently, it had a huge impact on a lot of people. Not so much me. I saw it in the theaters when it came out and said, well, okay, he loves her, she loves him, the boat sinks. Now I have a different view. If you think Rose is not, well, I don't know, how do you describe her? A criminal? A mental patient? Anyway, if you disagree, that's what the comment section is for. Put it down there. Kate Winslet, if you're watching, go right ahead. James Cameron, anybody, any of my viewers, please. Make yourselves known in the comments. Also like, subscribe, share on social media. This is how YouTube works. You probably understand that already. Bill Paxton plays the treasure hunter Brock Lovett. He is running an expedition to search the ruins of Titanic, the shipwreck, for an extremely valuable necklace, the heart of the ocean. What he does find is a sketch of a young woman in the nude wearing the necklace. That's recovered from the wreck. And that winds up on television, and Rose, and now literally 100 years old, sees it on television and contacts the treasure hunters and says, that's me in the sketch. And so we get this frame story where she goes to the treasure hunting ship and she tells them that she was a young woman from a family with an aristocratic name, but no money. Well, actually, that no money thing we're going to hold on to. She goes on a Titanic. She's there with her fiance, Cal Hockley, who is the scion of a Steele family. Rose is terrible. It's 22 minutes into the film when we get our first shot of young Rose, right? Here's Titanic panned down to Rose getting out of a luxury automobile. Beautiful glamour shot of Rose. She's 17 years old. She turns around to Cal and says, I don't see what all the fuss is about. It doesn't look any bigger than Mauritania. Well, thank you very much, world's leading expert in shipbuilding, but it's nearly 13% longer and a good deal more luxurious. But okay, you know best. A few minutes later, she's sitting at a dining table with Cal, played by Billy Zane, also with her mother, who's along for the ride. The representative of the White Star Line is at the same table, and the man who designed the ship. They're all sitting at the table. Rose lights up a cigarette. Her mother says to her, under her voice, I don't like that. Rose turns and blows smoke into her mother's face. Now this is played like Rose has got moxie, and here we are Again, bad behavior by female characters. Would we accept this in a male character? If Cal, Rose's fiance, had lit up a cigarette at the table and Rose's mother had said, and you know I don't like it when you smoke at the table, and he'd blown smoke in her face, would we be like, yeah, Cal's the dude? No, we would think, what's wrong with this prick? But Rose does it, and she's cool, I guess. She's got nerve because she's female. Imagine if you were sitting at a table with some people and somebody's 17-year-old daughter lit up a cigarette at the table and their parents said, you know, I don't like that, and the teenager blew smoke in their parents' face. Would you be like, yeah, kid, you're going places. You're clearly the hero of this story. Shortly after that, Rose leaves the table in a huff, and she is so sad and so troubled at being young, beautiful, well-educated, and sailing in first-class wealth with her rich, handsome, generous fiancé, that about 4 minutes of screen time later, she's racing for the stern to throw herself off into the ocean at night. But, as it turns out, Jack Dawson is on the stern, and he sees her trying to work up the nerve to fling herself into the ocean, and he tries to talk her out of it. So, let's see. Impulsivity, suicide attempts or suicidal gestures, volatile emotions, a tendency to alienate the people in your life, self-sabotage. These are the textbook symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Also, Jack, and any young men who might find this movie on Netflix, if you meet a woman in the act of committing suicide, do not put your dick in her. She's got issues. And Rose, gonna suggest this. I know you're sad that your fiancé is up to his ears in wealth and is sharing it with you generously. And hey, mom, bring her along for the ride. I'll take care of her too. And any children we might have, we'll have it made from day one. All I ask is you don't blow smoke in people's faces at dinner parties. Also, I expect you to be monogamous with me because you are my fiancé. In 1912, of course, that would have been expected monogamous relationship. Today, if someone says to you in America, or in England or any Western country, hey, meet my fiancé, you assume that they're in a monogamous sexual relationship. That's all Cal seems to want at the beginning, but he's not going to get it. Anyway, I'm sorry, Rose, that you're sad about this, but, you know, you could maybe use the position and wealth you're going to have as Cal's wife to fight illiteracy or childhood tuberculosis or malaria or racism or campaign for women getting the vote, for example, but none of that seems to cross your mind. Throwing yourself off the stern is the first thing that comes to you. Or, hey, here's your backup plan, banging some dude you met on the quarterdeck one night after dark. Anyway, Jack talks her out of throwing herself off the ship. She says, don't come any closer, you know, I'll throw myself off. He says, no, you won't. Rose says, what do you mean I won't? Don't presume to tell me what I will and will not do. You don't know me. Rose is terrible. Anyway, Jack persuades her to come back on deck, and she turns around to come back, but she slips. She nearly falls. Jack grabs her. She starts screaming for help. Jack pulls her on board and inadvertently winds up lying on top of her in this chaotic situation. Some crewmen come running to her screams. They misread this as a sexual assault. So this is important, by the way, for our sex negativity. They've known each other for about 2 minutes. He winds up lying on top of her and nearly goes to prison for it. It's read as a sexual assault. Before we can get to sex, we've got to make at least a glancing reference to rape. You know, terror, crime, negativity, even only a mistake. And it's a few minutes later that Rose says, hey, this was an accident. I nearly slipped and fell off. In the meantime, by the way, Jack is in handcuffs. Cal shows up, and in another demonstration of what a jerk Cal is, Cal calls Jack filth and says, how dare you put your hands on my fiancé? Yeah, everyone there thinks, except for Jack and Rose, thinks that Jack just sexually assaulted Rose. Cal is angry. How dare you put your hands on someone who doesn't want you to put your hands on them? That's something we believe today as well. That wasn't an idea that they only had in 1912. But he says, my fiancé. Well, Rose is, in fact, his fiancé. Not the words necessarily I would choose today in that situation, but it's 1912. This is something that movies do that annoys me. They make a period piece, whether it's Mad Men or Titanic or what have you. They have characters behave in ways that were congruent with their cultural expectations. This kind of behavior would have been thought of as perfectly normal by everyone around them. And then want to blame those characters for it. What is his problem? He doesn't think like a late 20th century liberal intellectual. Well, that's because he's a early 20th century business magnate. In any case, Rose says, no, it's a big mistake. And Jack gets invited to have dinner in first class, like the next night. But again, this is negative meme number 2, danger is sex. This dangerous situation of her hanging off the back of the ship turns into what looks like a sexual encounter that plunges Jack into danger of being incarcerated. This is not sex positivity. Titanic, of course, has a lot of material about class. That there were different classes of people. There was first class aboard Titanic, and very rich people where first class suite was palatial and cost many thousands of dollars, even in today's money, probably tens of thousands of dollars. Whereas people down in third class and steerage were packed in for a room. And of course, when the catastrophe happened, it was the first class passengers who were evacuated first, and the poor died disproportionately. Here's the thing. I find it a little hard to go along when a multi-billion-dollar international conglomerate herds together a dozen or so millionaires to shake their finger in my face about the evils of greed. Did the poor die disproportionately in the disaster? Yes, they did, because of priorities in evacuation and so on, and that's not right. But if they had all been evacuated together, do you think the poor people would have been on the deck saying, oh, no, please, you go. There's no reason that I should live and you should die, and not the reverse. No, they would have been desperate to escape, as everyone was desperate to escape. Obviously, the evacuation plan should not prioritize people based on their pocketbook. But just don't sell me this idea that poor people are better because they're poor, especially when James Cameron himself made $100 million on his back end points, when DiCaprio and Winslet both made millions of dollars in these roles. Don't try to class warrior me with this. That's a side note. Let's move on. Rose starts running around the ship with Jack. Her mother notices that her mother's not keen about that. Jack comes to dinner in first class, and first class condescends to him. And then Jack slips her a note, make every day count, which is a reference to something they've said to each other. Meet me by the clock. The clock, of course, is on the grand staircase, kind of the central focal point of the ship, the major intersection. She goes to the clock. They're both in their first class finery, and Jack takes her to a party below decks. Drunken rager with poor people, where people are getting falling down smashed. That wasn't happening in first class, I want to point out. And there are a lot of children in the room. I'm not trying to be down on poor people. What I'm saying is, don't romanticize poverty. And don't tell me that poor people are better because they're poor. He takes her to this secret drinking contest downstairs below decks, where there are a lot of children in a room where the adults are getting falling down hammered. Again, not going on in first class. And hooray for them. So, to summarize, Rose is engaged to Cal Hockley. In the backstory, Cal told her, I love you, I want to marry you, I'll take care of you, your mom, any children we might have on Easy Street forever. Rose said, yes. Rose comes onto the ship, and the next thing that Cal knows is she's running all over the ship with some dude she met up on deck. She's going to secret drunken parties that she tries to conceal from Cal. She doesn't tell him she's going. She doesn't ask him if that's all right. She just goes with another man. The next morning, Cal has heard about this because he has a servant, his manservant, Spicer Lovejoy, keeping an eye on Rose. He's angry. And he brings up to her at breakfast and says, you will never behave like that again. Which is played like Cal being a jerk. He's upset because his fiancée went to a secret drunken bash that she concealed from him, and she went with another man. Rose says, I'm not one of your mill foremen that you can command. I'm your fiancé. Well, yeah, Rose, you are his fiancé, which means that he has every right to have a lot to say about what's going on in your social life. That's how it works then and now. Cal gets angry. He smashes the breakfast dishes on the floor and says, then you will honor me as a wife is required to honor her husband. I'm not saying smashing dishes is a good thing. I'm not recommending that. I'm not saying thumbs up to that. Again, attitudes were different then, and I think it's kind of cheap to say this person behaved in a way that would have been viewed as acceptable then, but we're going to think of them as a villain because we are separated from them by a century. What I am saying is I understand why Cal's upset. His fiancée is running all over the ship with some other dude. Oh, and by the way, I believe is that by this point that Cal has given her the heart of the ocean, an extremely expensive necklace worth more than the Hope Diamond, multi-millions dollars. This is a gift he's given the woman he thinks he's going to spend his life with. But she's below decks whooping it up with that guy, the homeless artist. It's in the next scene that Rose's mother comes and sees her and says, what the hell do you think you're doing? And it's revealed that Rose and her mother are broke. They have an aristocratic name, but Rose's father died and left them with nothing but bad debts. And her mother says, do you want to see me working as a seamstress and our fine things sold at auction? And Rose is like, it's so unfair. Unfair? Unfair. That your rich, handsome, generous, athletic, tall fiancé seems to want to do nothing but shower you with attention and wealth. Oh, bring mom along too, no problem with that. He asked you to marry him, you said yes, nobody put a gun to your head. But it's unfair. It's unfair that you can't run off to be with a guy you met up on deck the other night. Okay. Again, these are the symptoms of borderline personality disorder. This is something we understand now in the early 21st century that wasn't so well understood when Titanic was sailing. In an interesting moment, Jack manages to sneak a meeting with Rose soon after. Rose's position is, I have to be with Cal, Jack, go away. And Jack goes to her and says, Rose, you're no picnic. You're a spoiled little brat even. But under that, you're the most amazingly, astounding, wonderful woman that I've ever known. Because you had dinner with her once? Because she liked your drawings? Okay. You actually started this with Rose, you're no big picnic, you're a spoiled little brat. And now Rose is wobbling all over the place. Cal, Jack, Cal. But before the sun goes down, she's back to Jack, and they have their big moment on the bow, sailing into the sunset. You know, she puts her arms out. They kiss. Clearly, they're in love. Clearly, she is the girl for Jack, even though just a couple of hours ago she told Jack to fuck off. But she liked his sketches, and she can chug a beer, so they're meant to be together. That moment on the bow dissolves into a view of the bow of the wreck on a computer monitor on board the treasure hunter ship, and elderly Rose says, that was the last time Titanic ever saw daylight. So here we go. Danger is sex and the wanting disaster. As Rose and Jack's relationship develops in passion and clearly is moving toward sexual contact, their first kiss on the bow goes immediately to, hey, don't forget the wreck. That's the last time Titanic ever saw daylight. So, sex, catastrophe. Their relationship is tied together with the catastrophe. They are getting closer and closer to one another, more and more passionate. The iceberg looms ever closer. But let's return to bad behavior in female characters. Jack and Rose then retire to Rose's stateroom, suite of rooms, which Cal paid for. This is where Rose decides that she wants Jack to sketch her in the nude, and Rose takes her clothes off in front of Jack, and wearing only the heart of the ocean, she lies down and Jack sketches him, but not before Rose hands him a quarter and says, as a paying customer, I expect to get what I want, because she's still got to be a bossy brat, because that's evidently awesome. She knows perfectly well that she is seducing Jack. She knows perfectly well that she's steering him toward a sexual encounter while Titanic steams toward the iceberg. Rose doesn't know it's steaming toward the iceberg, we do. Their off-screen orgasms are tied to the catastrophe. Once the sketch is complete, she puts it into Cal's safe with a little note on it that says, "Darling, now you can keep us both locked in your safe." She puts it in the safe along with the Heart of the Sea. By now, Cal has noticed that she is missing again, and he's sent his manservant to find her, and Jack and Rose go hide in the cargo hold where they climb into Cal's automobile, which is being shipped to America, along with their party, and that's where they fuck. Rose gets in the back seat, Jack gets in the front. Jack is like, "Where do you want to go, miss?" playing it being the chauffeur. She drags him into the back seat and says, "Jack, put your hands on me." This is clearly Rose's idea. Rose very much steers Jack into this sexual encounter. This is intercut with the disaster that's about to happen. Cut away from the car to two sailors who are on lookout talking about icebergs. Cut back to the car, windows steamed up, Rose's hand in the famous shot on the rear window. That's at 1:35:12 on the first disc if you're watching this on Blu-ray. The building sexual passion and ecstasy is intertwined with the rising danger and the doom that is about to fall on all of them. At 1:35:40, that's 1 hour 35 minutes 40 seconds, Jack and Rose are poised coital. Their sex was off screen. We don't really get to see that, and they don't talk about it ever. They never say, "We just had sex, that's fun, let's do that again." They don't talk about it. She's gazing into his eyes. She says, "You're trembling," and he replies, "Don't worry, I'll be all right." This is clearly a foreshadowing of his death by icy drowning. Well, freezing to death in the water, he doesn't drown. Jack and Rose go up on the deck. Rose tells Jack that when they arrive in New York, she's getting off the ship with him. She doesn't ask Jack what he thinks about that, by the way. She doesn't say, "Hey, how would you like to be my life partner?" She doesn't say, "I'm leaving Cal." There's no moment in this movie where she says to Jack, "Okay, I'm leaving Cal, my relationship with Cal is over. I'm dumping Cal, I want you to be my man." She just says, "I'm getting off the ship with you." Very selfish. This is Rose's ongoing theme. She doesn't expect Jack to say no, or allow him an opportunity to speak for himself. She says to Jack, though, "It doesn't make any sense. That's why I trust it." This again, hey, Rose, there are millions of girls like you who are living in poverty, who are having to put in 12-hour days at the factory. You're on easy street. So the idea that you're overwhelmed by the fact that you're doing so well and are so lucky and want to escape, I have no sympathy for, and I don't understand why you do either. Explain it to me in the comments section, please. I would love to hear it. And now we come to the most vital moment. Jack and Rose are down on the deck. They are embracing, they are kissing. Rose is saying, "I want to get off the ship with you in New York." And the lookouts high above, who are supposed to be looking for icebergs, one of them looks down and sees Jack and Rose embracing, having a sexual encounter or some sex play, and that lookout turns to the other and says, "Well, if that's what you got to do to stay warm, you're out of luck," or something like that. And they have a laugh, and then they look up and go, reverse shot, there's the iceberg. The lookouts were distracted by Jack and Rose making out. The lookouts were not looking out. Jack and Rose sank the Titanic. So, frantic sequence starts, the lookout, communicates with the bridge, iceberg dead ahead, all these shots of the engine room, the bridge and so on, steer the ship, out they hit the iceberg, bam. Cut back to Jack and Rose, still kissing on deck, boom, you hit the iceberg. The iceberg goes right past them. Ice nearly lands on their heads, big chunks of ice falling on the deck, any one of which could have seriously injured them. Sex, danger, dangerous sex, the wanting disaster. You want to have sex, you want to have a sex, you want to spend your life having sex with this person? Catastrophe, a bunch of people are about to die. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes watching people freeze to death, watching people panic and die in terror and horror, watching people clutch their children to themselves in a futile attempt to keep those infants warm, but the infants will die too. Because we enjoyed watching Jack and Rose have sex, or at least having it be implied for us. The Titanic strikes the iceberg less than 7 screen minutes after Jack and Rose get into Cal's car. By the way, one of the first places to flood is the cargo hold where the car is. So, by now, Cal has found the nude sketch in the safe. Now, this would have been especially shocking in 1912. It's shocking today. Think about that. What if your fiance left a nude photograph of them, clearly taken by someone they met yesterday, with a snarky little note on it that amounts to "go screw yourself"? How would you feel about that? Anyway, Cal finds that. And a few minutes later, Rose, having been freshly banged in the cargo hold, comes back to the stateroom holding Jack's hand. Let's play my favorite game, reverse the sexes. While we're talking about bad behavior in female characters, what we're talking about is bad behavior in female characters that we would never accept in a male character. Let's reverse the sexes. Callista Hockley is the daughter of a steel magnate. Her family is up to their ears in money. She's got plenty. It's 1912. She's fallen in love with Robert, who has an aristocratic name but is poor. Callista says, "Don't worry about that. I love you. Let's be married. Be my husband. Bring your mom along. I'll take care of her. I got lots of money. And I will have one of my staff standing ready in the delivery room to pop a silver spoon into the mouth of any of our children who emerge into this world." And Robert said yes. So then they say, "Let's go to New York." And the way you do that is on a transatlantic steamer. Let's get on the Titanic. It's the latest thing. Top of the line technology, safest ship to ever float. Also, gorgeous. Have you seen this place? Knock your eyes out. Within 24 hours of getting on the ship, though, Robert is running around with Jackie, a homeless artist he met out on deck one night. Next thing Callie knows, that is to say, Callie short for Callista, her fiance is sneaking off to drunken hootenanny with Jackie, who he met yesterday. When Callie says to Robert, "Hey, no, not okay, you're not allowed to behave like that," Robert says, "I'm not someone you can command, I'm your fiance." "Yeah," Callie responds, which means you're not allowed to go sneaking off to parties with other men. Other women in this example. But, guess what? It gets worse. I think the next day, Callie finds a sketch of Robert done by the inimitable art genius Jackie. Robert in the nude, wearing nothing but some very expensive jewelry that Callie gave her fiance, the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. And that sketch is left where she can find it and has a snarky little note on it that says basically, "How dare you forbid me to sneak off to get falling down wasted at parties with chicks I met yesterday." Oh, and Robert and Jackie have just been doing it in the cargo hold, and they appear still sweaty from their exertions, holding hands in the stateroom that Callista paid for. That's our pitch. That's Titanic. Same story, just reverse the sexes. Would that movie get made? No, you're laughing at me right now. You can type "ha ha ha" in the comments. You're thinking, what? No, Crazy Town, no way. No, that guy's a jerk. Robert's a first-class jerk. They ought to throw him overboard. They ought to throw him under the iceberg. But when Rose does it, she's a feminist hero. How? She doesn't go to Cal and say, "Cal, I'm sorry. I know I accepted your invitation. It was everything was so overwhelming and it was such a whirl, but I made a mistake in accepting your proposal of marriage, and it would be a bigger mistake not to correct now. I have to break off the engagement. It's not right. It's not right for me, and it's not right for you, and it wouldn't be fair to anybody." No, she doesn't do that. She just runs all over the ship with another man and then fucks him. And then comes back to the stateroom she shares with her fiance holding that guy's hand. Cal is the wronged party, but now Cal has to start to go off the rails. He has to, because if he doesn't, Rose is terrible. Somehow what Cal starts to do now justifies what Rose did then. Cal frames Jack for stealing the heart of the sea. Jack winds up handcuffed in a lower deck, wherever they take miscreants. But of course, Titanic has already hit the iceberg and has only 2.5 hours remaining above the surface of the icy northern Atlantic. And then the rest of the movie is terror, horror, mass death, children freezing to death, etc., etc., etc. Again, watch these two people, isn't it great? Look at these two people, these two lovers, they're gonna, oh, look at that, they're gonna come together, oh, look at that, they kissed, oh, look at that, they interlock their genitals, and then catastrophe for everyone in the zip code. At about 28 minutes into this, Rose, being a woman, has a chance to get into a lifeboat, and in the chaos, she's there on deck with Jack and Cal at the same time, and they're both telling her, get in the lifeboat. Cal says, hey, look, I've made an arrangement with a crewman with another lifeboat. Jack and I will have seats. I paid the guy off. Of course, he's lying. Only Cal will get a seat, and Jack knows it. But Rose gets in the lifeboat, is on her way to safety, but leaps off the lifeboat back to Titanic. She won't leave without Jack. She throws herself into Jack's arms. I love you, right in front of Cal, right in front of her fiance. And says, I love you, Jack. And, if you jump, I jump, which is a reference to something Jack said to her when she was trying to commit suicide. Yeah, he only said that to you to keep you from committing suicide. He wasn't actually going to jump. Or I hope not. Anyway, she's back on Titanic, telling Jack how much she loves him, directly in front of Cal. Cal goes totally nuts, grabs his bodyguard's 45 and starts blasting away. He can't shoot for shit though. Wow. I mean, let me tell you, this guy can't shoot. I saw the film. His form is terrible. Now, should you be shooting at people? No. Is this a good thing to do? No. It's not. Don't use violence in your personal relationships. But he has to shoot at them. Because if he doesn't behave like this, then he's clearly the wronged party. Somehow, what he does now justifies how Rose treated him back here, which is in defiance of causality. But he has to do this. The writers have to make him do this in order to make him into enough of a villain that retroactively Rose's terrible behavior is not so terrible. Jack and Rose wind up clinging to the stern of the ship, which of course winds up rising into the air. This is all based very much on the historical accounts. Comes down, Jack and Rose wind up in the water. Not before Rose reminds Jack, this is where we first met. Yeah, crazy town. They're in the water, Rose is floating on the door, Jack is in the water. Jack tells Rose that winning the poker hand that got him his ticket on the Titanic is the greatest thing that ever happened to him, and he makes her promise that she will survive. He's dying. He knows it. Mythbusters did an episode that proved that the door was quite big enough for two people. You can find that on Hulu, I believe. She says, I'll never let go, Jack. I'll never let go. But a few minutes later, she's breaking his corpsicle off her little raft to allow him to sink to the bottom because a lifeboat is circled back around looking for survivors. She gets their attention. Jump back to the frame story. Even in the frame story, Rose is terrible. Rose has kept the heart of the ocean hidden. I keep saying ocean or sea. I think the French word is maybe ambiguous. Anyway, she's kept it hidden for 84 years. No one knows she has it. Bill Paxton's character still thinks it's on the wreck. She hasn't mentioned it to anybody. It's an important historical artifact, but she hasn't shared it with the world. Selling it would have put her and her family on Easy Street forever, but she hasn't done that. Cal gave it to her, but somehow she keeps it as a keepsake of Jack, which is weird because it was Cal who gave it to you. Jack barely knew it existed, except when he was framed for its theft. She doesn't tell anyone about it ever, but she goes to the rail of the treasure hunting ship at night and throws it into the sea. Okay, could have sold it, could have helped your own family, could have donated the proceeds to charity, could have fed hungry orphans, but it makes you feel good in the moment to throw it into the sea because Jack's bones are down there somewhere. So this is helping nobody but you. The last shot of the film is an elderly Rose asleep on the treasure ship. She travels with a bunch of framed photographs. That's how selfish she is. And the camera pans over those photographs, and they're almost all of Rose, as I saw. Certainly the ones the camera lingers on are Rose alone. A glamour shot of Rose, because she later had a career as an actress. A shot of Rose on a horse smiling. Rose is lovely, Rose is beautiful, Rose is doing cool stuff. Rose had a life worth having, which, as represented in these photographs, is Rose doing fun stuff by herself. None of these photographs seem to feature the man that Rose later married and spent, we assume, many years with. Rose's children, Rose's grandchildren. No photographs of Rose on stage. She was an actress. No photograph of her with castmates. Just Rose doing her hobbies. Look how beautiful Rose was in her youth. Look at all the cool stuff she did. It's like her Instagram page, really, which is the definition of selfishness. And that dissolves into kind of a fantasy sequence on board Titanic where the camera pans along in the wreck, which turns into the ship in its heyday, in its beauty, in its fresh paint. And the camera goes into the grand staircase, and all these people are there. All these people who had been on Titanic, the ship's captain, the designer of the ship, all are there, all turn when the door opens. It's Rose coming in, dressed gorgeously and expensively. Everyone turns and looks at Rose, and Jack is waiting at the clock, and Rose goes up and takes his outstretched hand. It's implied, of course, that elderly Rose is dying, very much on cue, apparently on the treasure hunting ship, having told her story. And this is her death dream, which doesn't feature the man she married and had children with, doesn't feature her children, doesn't feature her grandchildren, doesn't feature any of the work she did as an actress or anything else that happened since she was 17. It features everyone on board Titanic applauding her infidelity with Jack. The world approves of Rose following her whims. Rose is terrible. And again, turn that around. If Rose had been named Robert and the rich fiancé had been Callista, this movie would never have been made. The pitch would have been laughed out of the room. I want to see Pitch Meeting, by the way, which is a very funny YouTube channel from Screen Rant. Do that as a pitch meeting. Would never happen. Because if a man behaved this way, the audience would sit there appalled. Just, what am I watching? I hope this guy's the first guy to have. Yes, when he freezes to death, we're doing this. Let him freeze to death twice, the son of a bitch. When Rose does it, she's a hero. And is still regarded as such. This negative behavior, this bad behavior in women, I think is part of this barrage of anti-sex messaging. Because what happens to Jack? Jack meets a beautiful young woman on board this glamorous ship, and she says, "Oh, come with me, come spend time with me. Oh yeah, look at me, like you can come up to the first class section. Hey, I'm engaged and everything, but don't worry about that. I'm looking at you, I'm looking at you, I'm looking at you, I'm looking, let's do it. Let's have sex in the cargo hold. And then I'm gonna survive while you freeze to death." Didn't work out for Jack. That's the wanting disaster, that's dangerous sex. That's sex negativity. So here we are in one of the most famous romances of the last 50 years. Absolutely stuffed to the brim with sex is doom. Their sexual relationship and the disaster like that. So, that's what Titanic is. If you disagree with me, go ahead and put it in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell your friends about what a genius I am. And come back next week if you're interested in looking at more of this. I do videos every week examining films and TV series, talking about the sexual attitudes that they're presenting to the audience. I do appreciate your time. Take a look at other videos I've got. I did a whole series on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and some other stuff you'll recognize. Thanks again. But I want to add something. People say to me when I make these complaints, but Brian, a movie's got to have conflict and drama and action. Of course it does, but it doesn't have to have all this sex negativity, and Rose doesn't have to be awful. So here's my alternative script for Titanic. Rose is engaged to Cal, and she's having second thoughts. She really got engaged to him only out of cultural expectation and social pressure. Cal is also having second thoughts, but he keeps that to himself. He only got engaged to Rose out of cultural expectation and social pressure. Secretly, Cal has been in love with Jane for years. New character. Jane is on his staff, or maybe Cal's mother's staff or something. He's been in love with Jane for years, and Jane is in love with him. But class differences make it impossible for them to express their feelings for one another, but their longing is clear to us. Rose on the ship meets Jack. That's your A storyline. She meets Jack. She starts to feel an attraction to Jack, a wild passion for Jack, the homeless artist. But she says to herself, no, I can't do that. I'm engaged to Cal. Cal proposed to me, and I said yes, and that's an obligation, and I must think of my mother, who is poor, and I'm poor, and Jack's poor, and that's no good, right? So, but she's still spending time with Jack, and gets drunk with him or goes to the party or something. Anyway, Cal finds out about their spending time together, and somewhere along the line, of course, the ship hits the iceberg. So we're mixing in the story of the sinking too. But Cal finds out that Rose and Jack are together, and he confronts Rose, and maybe Rose is trying to avoid this conversation because she thinks he's going to be angry. But what he says is, listen, I see your feelings for this man, and I see that love should conquer all. Now I know. Seeing you with Jack makes me realize that we should follow our hearts. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have proposed to you. It was all social expectation and cultural pressures and stuff. And I'm in love with Jane. I've been in love with Jane for years. I'm going to go to Jane and tell her I love her. You go be with Jack. That's the right thing. Hey, you know what? Take this necklace. Take the heart of the sea. My gift to you. God bless you both. I am going to go seek happiness with the woman I love. So then, and the ship is sinking, or about maybe where exactly you hit the iceberg in this timeline can be worked out. So Jack and Rose make love. Certainly, they're in love. Great. Cal goes to Jane and says, hey, you know what? I've broken it off with Rose because I love you. And Jane says, oh my God, I love you too. But now the ship is sinking. So now you've got certainly plenty of room with the ship, sinking of the ship, for drama, terror, mass panic, etc. Obviously, a lot of that plotline has to change now. But hey, the ship's going down. We'll figure out something interesting to do with the story. Jack and Rose struggle to survive. Cal and Jane struggle to survive. Cal doesn't make it. Maybe Jane makes it, maybe she doesn't. That's to be discussed later. Jack and Rose barely make it. They make it out. They make it out with Cal's generous gift. And the world doesn't know that Rose and Cal broke off their engagement. Right? The world doesn't know that. So Rose doesn't suffer any kind of embarrassment or public shaming because of it. Cal dies, maybe Jane as well. That reinforces the tragedy, the loss of life. These lovers have just found each other, probably don't have a chance to ever make love, but die together. That's tragic, but Jack and Rose do make it out and make a life together and have a sexual relationship going forward. So not everyone gets punished for their sexuality. Rose is not a first-class asshole, and the movie is better. I fixed it.